Hey, friends and foes and family and water lovers all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Water is the New Gold. I'm Tommy V, your water doctor, and today's topic is the Brita Filter. More importantly, the Brita cartridge. This is the muscle behind the famous Brita system. Now, there's all kind of reviews on the internet about the Brita, but I'm here to tell you this one is going to be the most exhaustive you've ever seen. We're going to talk about, again, starting with this cartridge, why it's designed the way it does, what's inside of it, what we can expect from it, what it will do and what it won't do. So I'm inviting you to stay tuned and let's have some fun. Hey, welcome back. So I have in my hand the Brita cartridge for the pitcher system. This is the engine, the muscle behind the whole system. And the first thing we want to take a look at is the top. As you open the filter box, you'll see that Brita points out they have an aerated top to assure even flow. But as a consumer, what does even flow do for you? What does it mean? So let's take a look at my first chart, and you'll see a example called a single entry point. And if we didn't have that diffuser and the water was allowed to just pour onto the top of the filter, it would create something called a water channel. And essentially, physics tells us water takes the path of least resistance. So once the water burrowed that hole into the filter, any other water coming into the filter is going to go down the channel. And as you can see, it won't contact the rest of the media, so you'll get no filtration. You'll have a poor quality. In the second example, we see a diffused entry point, and that serrated and that aerated feature that Brita talks about is known all throughout the industry, and industrial filters have what's called a diffuser at the top. It takes that initial flow of water and it separates it into countless small microstreams, and it spreads it out over the whole surface area of the bed. So then the water can soak down and it comes into contact with all the media, and by the time it comes out, you have superior water. So this aerated feature that Brita has gets a big plus from us. Let's go to the next step. So here we are in my lab. I cut open a Brita cartridge, laid the media out for you to take a look at. Upon gross examination, it looks unremarkable, just like a bunch of black stuff in there, which would be a proper observation because half of the Brita cartridge is granular activated carbon. And not only does Brita rely heavily on this material, but pretty much every consumer filter available uses granular activated carbon to a great extent. However, if we shed a little bit of ultraviolet light on this, we see that mixed in with that granular activated carbon are these little green beads. Brita describes that as ion exchange resin, and that's exactly what it is. We're going to go back to the video and talk a little bit more about both of these materials and what they do and what they don't do. We'll see you in a minute. Okay, students, you can take off your glasses now. We're out of the lab. But let's talk about the contents of that filter that we just looked at. And first off, we'll talk about activated carbon. What is it? Where does it come from? What can it do? What can it not do? Please take a look at the next insert, and we find out that most activated carbon comes from pyrolyzed coconut shells. Essentially what that means is they crush the coconut shell and they put it in a big round heating kiln and tumble it, cook it at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit or higher until it comes out this black hard charcoal format that we're used to seeing. The industry also gets activated carbon from clamshells. It could be from walnut shells, and now there's something called biocarbon where they're using things like rice husk and corn husk and feathers. You can make activated carbon out of anything. The harder particles are more favored because they have an ability to be treated at different temperatures with chemicals, so you can make them active to pull different things out, and they're also very durable. The way carbon works, if we had an electron microscope to take a look at the particle, we'd see a big black particle that looks like an asteroid with a lot of pores, holes in it. And these pores remove contaminants by a process called adsorption. Not absorption, but adsorption. What happens is, by something called van der Waals forces, contaminants are drawn to and they find a home inside those pores in the particle. Now, what activated carbon does, it certainly is known best in the industry for its high affinity for chlorine. If you want to get chlorine out of your water, the best thing you can possibly do, the most effective and economical, is activated carbon. Activated carbon also has a very high affinity for organic chemicals. When we talk about organic chemicals, we're talking about things with carbon atoms in them. And this would include drugs, solvents, fuels, pesticide, oil, grease, and really a variety of myriad of other toxic organic chemicals. Activated carbon is very poor at removing heavy metals. Activated carbon also won't remove arsenic or PFAS. If you want to take those out in a filter, you have to have another step. One of the things that often happens that's kind of related to this media is that a person will put their filter in use and find black fines or particles, black dust in their water, and it gives cause for concern. Well, first of all, this is not a cause for concern, because it's just, these black flakes are really just the carbon particles. They rub up against each other because they're so hard in transportation. You might drop it on the floor. It's kind of like sandpaper. They rub against each other and you get some dust that comes off. The hard part for the filter manufacturer is to keep them out of the water. And I'm going to go back live here, and we're going to take another look at this, the cut open filter. At the bottom of the Brita cartridge, you'll see 4 outlet holes. And if you can get up really close, I don't know if you can see that on this screen, but there's screen material in there. And that screen material is designed to pull these flakes out. And you would think, well, if there's screen material in there, I'm still getting black flakes in the product. That means it's in my water. It means it's a bad product. Here's the challenge. Here's the problem. There's no way to tell what the actual size of those particles breaking off the carbon particle are going to be. So the technology is there to filter that water to where no carbon fines would ever come through. I mean, we can go smaller than a bacterial particle to filter. The problem with that is that as a pore size of a filter screen decreases, you also decrease the flow. One of the complaints about pitcher filters is that while it doesn't flow fast enough. Well, they can make it flow a lot faster, but then you get a lot more black particles in your water. So there's a trade-off. How fine do you make that mesh to filter it? But if you're using organic or granulated activated carbon, you might as well get used to the fact that at some point you're going to see some black fines in the water. The good news is it doesn't hurt to drink this stuff. Let's go to the next segment. So here we are again, continuing on our exhaustive Brita study. The next thing I want to talk about is the second component of the media inside the cartridge, the ion exchange resin, those green dots that you saw back in the lab. Brita is very good about telling you on their literature that they include ion exchange resin, and they list a couple contaminants such as lead and cadmium that it takes out. But that's really a vague description, and we want to know what ion exchange resin is, how it works, what its limitations are, and why it's put there in the first place. So I invite you to take a look at my next slide, which of course is called ion exchange resin. In its basic form, ion exchange resin is a plastic bead. divinyl benzene bead. It also can be a powder, but the functionality of ion exchange resin is that it will capture one charged particle, generally an undesirable particle, and then it releases another more favorable particle into the water. The most common example of this is a water softener. Water softener has an ion exchange resin that takes calcium and the hardness, the scaling items out of the water, and it releases sodium. Once it is exhausted, ion exchange resin can be chemically rejuvenated by exposing it to a high concentration of the more favorable ions that you want in your water. And again, the way that works with the water softener, it takes calcium. When the system's exhausted, you hit it with brine solution, and that high amount of sodium kicks off the calcium, recharges it with sodium, and then you're ready to go to make new exchanges. Home filtration products don't involve rejuvenation of the ion exchange resin. When the resin's exhausted, you have to throw the cartridge away. Later on in this video, we'll talk about how the heck does the cartridge know when it's time to be thrown away. Back to ion exchange resin, it comes in really three forms. The first is a cationic form, which removes positively charged particles. This would be lead, chromium, and copper. It also comes in a anionic form, which removes negatively charged particles, such as chloride, fluoride, and sulfate. Ion exchange resin also comes in something called mixed bed form, which includes both the cationic and anionic resin. This is typically not used much in drinking water, although there are a few filters that use mixed bed. But mixed bed resin produces the highest purity of water from an ionic standpoint, and generally to make lab quality water or water for electronics or the power industry, you have to use mixed bed resin. But there are some caveats that we can talk about in a later video why it's not really desirable to put mixed bed resin into a home drinking filter. One final note, the Brita uses a special type of resin called weak acid cation resin. This is unique and it's very common and desirable for a home drinking water filter because it ignores the beneficial cations, such as calcium. And it removes the more toxic things like the Brita claims of lead and cadmium. And the reason that's important is because most city water supplies have a high concentration of hardness, calcium, and iron, and a very small concentration, minute concentration of these toxic metals. So if you use the water softening resin, you would quickly exhaust that resin with calcium and you'd remove very little heavy metals. But by using the weak acid cation resin, you ignore the calcium and you leave more of that resin available to remove the toxic materials that you want. So now let's get on to the final segment of this video, and that is kind of the discussion of what you can expect from the Brita filter, what it'll do, what it won't do, promises, where it falls short. So let's take a look at my last slide. This slide is called, "What else do I need to know?" I think the big shining question, and this is for any consumer filter, but does Brita guarantee safe drinking water? The answer to that is an emphatic no, it does not. The only guarantee of safe drinking water that we have in the United States are the parameters set forward by the Safe Drinking Water Act. Currently, there is no filtration product available to us that will meet those guarantees. What Brita does promise is cleaner, great tasting water. We got to ask, how does that happen? Well, the dirty little secret for Brita and for 99% of the other filtration companies in the market is that activated carbon, by removing chlorine, removes just that is a big objection that people have to the smell and taste of their water. So the carbon goes a long way. And then if there are organic chemicals, you know, the pesticides, the odor causing organic debris, carbon's really good at taking that out. So the water is claimed to taste better, and I think Brita does a good job of that. Another question is, how does the Brita cartridge know when I should change the filter? Obviously, there's no meters or electronics with this, but there is, again, another dirty little secret. The capacity of activated carbon to remove chlorine is very well known. The Safe Drinking Water Act calls for a chlorine level of, I believe, no more than 4 parts per million of chlorine in our drinking water. So no matter where you go in the United States, Brita knows what the maximum chlorine concentration is going to be. So they choose, I believe, somewhere around 40 gallons to exchange the filter, knowing full well that this volume of carbon could remove as much as 2,000 gallons of chlorine from the water. So by telling you it's good for 40, all these filter companies really have a built-in safety net. The reason they stop at 40 is because what they don't know is what is the concentration of heavy metals in your water. They have to make a best guess at that. What they do, again, they take a look at the EPA enforced Safe Drinking Water Act, and for instance, they'll look at cadmium, and if it says it's X part per million, then you do your study, and you assume that tap water across the United States will not exceed that volume. So that's the contaminant level they use, and then they go and do a test, and then they get the NSF certification. And that's the final technical question, is that what does that NSF certification mean to me? Earlier on, I said that Brita nor any other filter will give you safe drinking water. And that's absolutely true. It will guarantee you 92%, 95% removal, which then your question is, well, isn't that safe? Well, I'm going to go back to the live camera here with an example. And let's say that I was the TSA, and I told you that I could remove 95% of possible terrorists from the flights. Would you feel comfortable knowing that 5% of the terrorists are going to get through? Well, it's the same way with water. I have a great objection to the NSF and this whole Water Quality Association testing, because they don't guarantee you safe drinking water. And I think it is egregious, because I think most people, when they buy a filter, assume that the water's coming out is safe. So that leaves us with the question of, is the Brita product a good product? I'm here to tell you emphatically it is a good product. It's a great product. They're a wonderful company. They're ethical. They're very, their engineering and manufacturing are top notch. There's talk now, people are concerned about microplastics in the pitcher and in the cartridge. That's a whole new issue that needs to be addressed, but Brita faces the same challenge as everybody else does. But the filter does what it says it will do. It'll make your water taste better. It'll take out chlorine. It'll remove certain heavy metals. There's a lot of contaminants it won't remove, and it won't guarantee you safe drinking water. So keep that in mind. If you're going to buy the Brita, you're getting a great product, but you're not necessarily getting safe water. Tommy V, I'm signing off. Please subscribe to my channel. I have a website called wateristheNewGold.com. If you pop over there in a few hours, I'll have all this material on my blog, and you can download my documents if you want to keep those for whatever reason. Again, I'd ask you to take a look at my book, Open Tap, Drink Poison, available at Amazon. It tells you everything you ever want to need to know about water. Guys, thanks for tuning in. And feel free to shoot me your questions. I'd love to talk to you.